Cameron has walked away from politics, but politics continues to pursue David Cameron. Less than 48 hours after resigning his seat, it's open season on the former Prime Minister and his legacy.
We Europeans can never accept, never, Polish workers being harassed, beaten up or even murdered in the streets of Essex.
Good evening. David Cameron resigned on Monday. By this morning, the knives were out for him, implicitly in Brussels for helping to create, thanks to Brexit, a Britain in which hate crime is on the rise, explicitly by some of his own party colleagues for being too hasty and gung-ho over military intervention in Libya in 2011 and the chaos that ensued. Is David Cameron following in Tony Blair's footsteps? The White Helmets of Syria, the volunteers who risked their own lives to save other people's. Before she was killed, the late Jo Cox was their biggest champion. Now her campaign to get them nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize is gathering pace. And
not really something you should be doing tonight.
The Sleaford Mods, known for swearing, ranting and singing, have been suspended from the Labour Party for doing too much of the first on social media. Now, when David Cameron made his fateful decision to call a referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union, he probably never imagined quite how quickly defeat would lead to much of his legacy unravelling. In a moment, we'll be hearing now how he's been given the blame by MPs for the chaos that is Libya. But we begin tonight with Brexit and a new warning from the President of the European Commission that Britain could not have an à la carte option after leaving the EU. Here's our political editor, Gary Gibbon.
The President of the European Commission was giving his annual report to the European Parliament. He insisted the EU would survive Britain's departure. He warned Britain it should forget any thoughts of keeping the advantages of single market membership if it restricts the freedom of EU citizens to come to Britain.
There
can be no à la carte access to the single market.
The MEP, who's the European Parliament's point man on the Brexit negotiations, said Europe could improve without Britain on board.
Let's stop on both sides of the channel our collective depression. And let's use, in fact, stop the politics of division and seize this opportunity not to kill Europe, as some of you want, but to reinvent Europe. Thank you.
There's profound concern in the City of London that financial services here could sprout up in Paris and other EU financial centres, lured by the privileges of single market membership denied to Britain. Oliver Letwin is the man David Cameron asked to look at negotiation strategies post-Brexit. He only got 2 weeks in that job, but it left him deeply worried.
The accountants, the lawyers, the consultants, the many, many hundreds of thousands of people working in and around the City of London who, between them, generate a large part of the British economy, there's a danger that those people would gradually seep away to Frankfurt or Paris or some other financial centre if the retail financial services went. And of course, if that were to happen, then gradually too the wholesale markets might begin to migrate and you could eventually see a massive blow.
Oliver Letwin says the government might just get a deal that protects service sector jobs. On his trawl through Whitehall, he says he discovered hundreds of agreements Britain has with European countries across a whole range of subjects like security, defence, which he hopes could make Europe look differently at Britain's demands.
The trick here is to identify enough cases in which there are things our counterpart governments want that we would be willing to give to build up a kind of war chest for trading in order to get as much as possible, both by way of control of migration and by way of access for financial and professional services.
Providing a solution for that.
Former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, Paul Tucker, now a Harvard lecturer, has joined up with EU politicians and officials, daring to think Europe might seize this moment to construct an outer ring of membership with looser ties.
This idea of concentric circles is one that's been hovering around for a long time and is reasonably back on the table as something to contemplate.
Some of the most fervent pro-Leave Tory MPs think that sort of talk is delusional, and they are already organising to try and make Britain's exit from the EU much quicker. They doubt the value of EU institutions anyway. They don't think the EU's about to do us any favours, and they intend to force the pace on Theresa May.
If you stick to the dogma of saying that for tariff-free access, to reciprocal tariff-free access with the single market, we must maintain the free movement of people, then you will inevitably drive us towards no deal.
In the European Parliament, Nigel Farage was sounding his own pessimistic note on the negotiations. The European Commission President spoke of his outrage at the rise in hate crime stirred up in Britain by the referendum campaign.
We Europeans can never accept, never, Polish workers being harassed, beaten up or even murdered in the streets of Essex.
In Essex today, police were joined by 2 Polish police officers there to reassure Polish residents in the area after the killing of a Polish man in Harlow last month. They said they planned to patrol for at least 1 week.
And as if a legacy of Britain leaving the EU against his advice wasn't enough, David Cameron today found himself being partly blamed for the rise of ISIS. MPs on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee said that a lack of planning after the bombing of Libya in 2011 led to chaos there and the growing influence of the Islamic State group. Here's our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman.
5 years ago tomorrow, David Cameron was greeted in Libya to cries of thank you.
Colonel Gaddafi.
This the most Blair-like moment of his foreign policy. Another dictator gone.
Your friends in Britain and in France will stand with you as you build your democracy and build your country for the future. Thank you very much.
Mr Cameron resigned from Parliament this week, just ahead of the hubris of another British intervention being followed by the nemesis of another damning report. The Foreign Affairs Committee says the result in Libya was political and economic collapse, inter-militia and inter-tribal warfare, humanitarian and migrant crises, widespread human rights violations, the spread of Gaddafi regime weapons across the region, and the growth of ISIL in North Africa. In other words, a long list. David Cameron's multi-million-pound memoirs will probably be his response, but we've heard this conclusion before.
If you are going to intervene, you better be absolutely crystal clear what your policy objective is, that you have the military means to deliver it, and you can then have whatever tools you need to back up the consequence of your military intervention.
Colonel Gaddafi had threatened to attack his people like rats, but the report says the government wrongly took the Libyan leader's rhetoric at face value.
Get out of your homes and attack the rats in their dens.
The relationship Tony Blair had previously built with Gaddafi was cast aside when it might have led to a negotiated peace. But even if Islamic State was unleashed here, Al-Qaeda had been there long before, and arguably the lack of intervention in Syria shows the risk of doing little.
We did the best we could with what we had at the request of Libyans themselves. And now, after some years and much difficulty, they are still trying. Contrast that with Syria. 500,000 dead, its population displaced, because nobody sought to help the population when a dictator said, I'm going to kill them.
As far as I'm concerned, I think it was right to get rid of Gaddafi, but the problem was there was absolutely no strategy to what to do with Libya once Gaddafi is gone. There were no institutions in Libya, so only Gaddafi was the main institution.
And without a murderous despot in charge of the coast, Africans are migrating en masse to Europe, more than 2,700 on a single day this month. Libya hasn't turned out well, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. And any Prime Minister faces the same dilemma: how to resist political and media pressure at the height of any crisis to do something when doing less may prove better in the long run. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, at the Foreign Office.
Well, let's go back to our political editor, Gary Gibbon. Gary, he only resigned on Monday. He's having a pretty bad week. Can it get any worse? And is that comparison with Tony Blair just?
Well, a lot of his friends are really quite miffed on his behalf about this report on Libya. They say the comparisons with Chilcot are ridiculous. For one thing, I can pick it up. Nothing like the same number of witnesses, not seeing lots of extra evidence, thin, partial, they call it. They're pretty upset about that. And as you say, it comes after a week that starts with grammar schools. Theresa May, it seems, to friends of David Cameron, increasingly defining herself on a lot of domestic political issues as in opposition to him. But we're about to see her conclusion of the nuclear energy policy of David Cameron's that she put on pause. She may yet have to sign up to that pretty soon, perhaps. And that's a reminder that no matter these early moments when the spotlight falls on your predecessor, when you're in that building, when you're in number 10, the focus really is, on the whole, unremittingly on you.
Gary, thanks very much indeed. Now, they started as a local group of volunteers seeking to provide some form of civil defence to a population under bombardment from its own government. Now Syria's White Helmets have become a national organisation, and one which may be in the running for the Nobel Peace Prize. The move to nominate the group was begun by the late Labour MP Jo Cox, who was killed in her constituency this summer, and it's now been taken up by a range of others. Channel 4 News has seen the letter that Jo Cox wrote to the Nobel Committee nominating the volunteer rescue force who risk their lives to save lives. In her short time as an MP, Jo Cox was haunted by the war in Syria and determined to do as much as she could to give its people a voice.
I have raised repeatedly in this place the need for a no-bombing zone.
Especially those people who act against all their instincts of self-preservation to save lives. The men and women who run into the mayhem after the bombs have gone off. The White Helmets. Jo Cox wanted them to get the Nobel Peace Prize. To save one life is to save humanity. That is their motto, a quote from the Quran. In the most dangerous place on earth, she writes, these unarmed volunteers risk their lives to help anyone in need, regardless of religion or politics. After her death, Jo Cox's family were honoured by the Syrian rescuers with the white helmet worn by a volunteer killed in service. Before the war, Abdurrahman was an engineer. Now he's a full-time volunteer for the White Helmets.
There aren't many people who know the reality we live in, but one of them was Jo Cox. We are planning to establish a White Helmet group called Jo Cox to save civilians and to carry on the message she was trying to convey to people.
This week sees the release of a television documentary about the White Helmets. In Parliament, MPs have signed a statement backing their nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. But despite this, no one has managed to replace Jo Cox in her advocacy for their cause.
Jo was an absolutely critical figure in UK politics on Syria. She went the extra mile to find out what it was that Syrian civilians on the ground needed.
To those who question their impartiality, the White Helmets insist they never take sides.
As an organisation, we distance ourselves from all the fighting groups and the parties involved in the Syrian conflict. Our only interest is saving civilians. We have been bombed and pressured from many sides, and what has helped us to continue is our neutrality and being independent.
Jo Cox ends her letter by saying, the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to these volunteers would do much to ensure their long-term success and survival as the heroes of the greatest humanitarian crisis of our era, and to emphasize peaceful coexistence and solidarity in Syria. Now, backed by famous actors, writers and business leaders, a coalition of human rights organizations has launched a new call to the US President Barack Obama to pardon the former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. Coinciding with the release of the Hollywood film Snowden, the group held a press conference to make their case with an appearance from the whistleblower himself via video link from Moscow.
for coming. This really isn't about me. It's about us. It's about our right to dissent. It's about the kind of country we want to have, the kind of world that we want to build. It's about the kind of tomorrow that we want to see.
Well, one country which might welcome Edward Snowden is Iceland, where the protest pirate party, which wants to offer him Icelandic citizenship, is hoping to be elected to government next month. Public protests forced the country's prime minister to quit his post in April after revelations about his wife's offshore holdings. Now they've voted in a president who's never before held elected office and has Eurosceptic views. Well, he's been visiting the UK, so I sat down with him and asked him about the rise of the pirates.
Yeah, that's a symbol of the distrust towards the old political parties.
So they could get in, they could form the next government.
Yeah, so we could end up seeing a complex, drawn-out process when we try to form a coalition up there. Will the Pirate Party be able to work with the other parties? That remains to be seen. You have to make compromises, and when you're an idealistic party like the Pirates, that can be pretty tricky.
The Pirates Party has said that if they get in, they would offer Edward Snowden, currently holed up in a hotel in Moscow, instant Icelandic citizenship. Would you welcome that?
This is a good example of how the pirates would possibly have to compromise, because were they to form a coalition and enter government, presumably the other parties in that coalition would have to agree on a step like this, which would raise eyebrows somewhere, shall we say.
Raise eyebrows in Moscow and in Washington.
Yeah.
Two very important strategic partners.
Exactly.
You're caught in the middle.
We're caught in the middle. That was good during the Cold War, but I don't know how good it is today.
So you're new to politics. The Pirate Party, which is also new to politics, might end up running the country. You've got your former Prime Minister who resigned in disgrace. You've got a couple of bankers still in jail. You're kind of showing the way, aren't you? For some people.
We are not that concerned about that per se. We just want to do things the right way. And if we are an example to others, let it be so.
Brexit.
Yeah.
The big topic of debate here. I'm sure you've been talking about it on your visit to the UK. Are you in favour of European Union membership or not?
I want to see how things develop. You have to see what we get. Iceland, traditionally a nation of farmers and fishermen. Fishing is so important for us economically and also for the national psyche, as it were. And you in Britain know that well. We are island nations. So there is this sense of standing apart. Right. So that's one obstacle that those in favor of membership will have to cross.
So there was a lot of sympathy in Iceland for the vote in this country, on this island.
Yes, but there was also, there was a camp who felt that a wrong decision had been taken, and it could be tricky for you guys if you want to reverse on all that. But I'm not getting involved in British politics by saying that, am I?
Yeah, you are.
All right.
What about the European Economic Area, EEA?
Yeah. There was this sense when we joined the EEA that we got the best of both worlds. Access to markets without having to go all the way. This is still a strong feeling in Iceland, that we have what we need through the EEA. Possibly you should look at the EEA and see whether it could be something for you guys.
We are.
You are indeed, yeah.
And you're saying don't bother?
Well, I'm not getting involved.
President Johannesson, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, it was a pleasure.
President Gudni Johannesson of Iceland. Now then, hedgehogs, turtle doves, water voles, all iconic wildlife that help make up Britain's rich landscape. But a conservation report out today says that more than half of native species are in decline and around 15% are facing extinction, making the UK one of the most nature-depleted countries on the world. Our science editor Tom Clark has been to Wales to look at the efforts being made to reverse that decline.
It's a face no one round here has seen for a century. After a wary sniff, a Scottish pine marten steps gingerly out into a Welsh wood for the first time. The radio collar marks this individual as part of a reintroduction project, bringing pine martens south of the border to reverse the near extinction of the mammals in England and Wales. The next day, we're out with the Vincent Wildlife Trust to radio track this pine marten and 4 others released at the weekend. For For this project to work, they need to know how the cat-sized mammals are taking to their new surroundings.
So the strongest over there, which matches our first bearing quite well. It puts
so she's probably behind that rise, you think?
Probably, maybe she's probably in one of these tall spruce trees.
Reintroducing pine martins isn't just about bringing back an iconic woodland predator. Ecologists see them as a keystone species, one that could bring wider benefits to the environment.
It's mainly to do with this idea of trying to build some more robustness into our wider ecosystems, and that includes having predators. You know, predators are an important part of our ecosystems, and I think we need to step back and see how we can reduce our costs by reintroducing natural processes to do that for us and to do it in perpetuity.
Here's an example, this reintroduced pine marten carrying off a grey squirrel. After decades without predators, invasive greys are a pest in many woods and gardens. Some believe pine martens could help native red squirrels return by killing off their competitors. Bringing back pine martens to the forests of mid-Wales is on its way to being a conservation success story. But today's State of Nature report finds that overall the opposite is happening, with more than half of our native animals and plants in decline. The report finds 165 species like freshwater pearl mussels and the high brown fritillary are critically endangered. Not all are doing badly. Otters have made a comeback, bitterns are booming, and the large blue butterflies returned. The biggest threat to our biodiversity is loss of habitat due to urbanisation, draining of wetlands and loss of traditional woods. But the greatest impacts are on farmed land that covered 75% of the UK.
This is to help overwintering birds find a food source from the sunflowers, from the barley, from the wheat.
Gloucestershire farmer Simon Payne has worked with government environment grants to turn a conventional arable farm to an organic one with added features for wildlife. Filled-in ponds have been dug out, nest boxes put in to benefit bird life. He feels the current incentive schemes are far too complex.
I would like to see it simplified, and hopefully, when my agreement finishes in 4 years' time, I can go carry on into some sort of stewardship, and I hope that it will be simpler by then. And the likes of the NFU, and likes of myself and other farmers have got to keep driving this home to DEFRA and Natural England to make this simpler to take up.
Change is definitely coming. Brexit will mean an automatic withdrawal from Europe's common agricultural policy that subsidises farmers. Conservationists say government now has a golden opportunity to put biodiversity at the heart of any new policy.
Sport now, and in a flurry of gold on day 7 of the Rio Paralympic Games, Team GB has now surpassed its London 2012 gold medal total. Dame Sarah Storey led the charge, finishing first in her road cycling time trial. At 38, this is her second win in Rio and 13th gold overall, making her Britain's most successful female Paralympian. They're musicians who've made a name for themselves swearing, ranting, oh yes, and singing about life in the East Midlands. So perhaps it's no surprise that the Sleaford mods have fallen foul of the Labour Party's latest crackdown on online abuse.
I was supposed to be going out, that took ages. Kids are on.
Jason Williamson claims that the party has suspended him for posting abusive tweets about the Barnsley MP Dan Jarvis. He since tweeted angrily about Labour's decision. I spoke to him from Nottingham earlier and asked how he felt about his suspension.
I'm all right about it today. Yesterday I was pretty cheesed off about it, primarily because I knew that I wouldn't be able to vote in the leadership election that's coming up, but solely to vote for Jeremy Corbyn.
The stuff that you were saying was quite filthy, and that's why you've been kicked out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was quite aggressive, but it wasn't exactly a direct tweet. If anybody that knows me or anybody that visits my or the band's Twitter page will tell you that it's a mixture of jokes and obscenities and quite aggressive, you know, sort of two-sentence tweets.
But, I mean, does it help your cause and does it help the cause of the Labour Party to use the kind of language that you used?
You know, it's one of them, isn't it? What can I expect? I suppose it's I kind of broke membership rules, so to speak. So what? You know, I mean, I just joined, like I say, to support Jeremy Corbyn.
Would you like him personally to intervene on your behalf so that you can vote for him?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't because there's hundreds of people like me that have been penalised as well for lesser things, mild tweets about liking the Green Party.
Would you describe yourself as an entrist?
Yeah, I would suppose. Yeah. An entrist that is about to exit.
What does it tell you about the state of the Labour Party that this sort of stuff is going on? That, one, you can be as offensive as you've been, which is frankly pretty terrible, and that you can get expelled for it at the same time?
Well, it's not really my party, really. I think I kind of almost bizarrely view Jeremy Corbyn as different from the Labour Party. We're wasting time here again discussing infighting. You know, we need to really be talking about the present government.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn is in a position to deal with all the stuff that's going on in his party? Is this something that he can deal with at the end of the day?
Well, I think so. If he gets if he wins the leadership, then I'd like to think, yeah, he'll start ironing out all these irritable creases. He's the only one out of all of them that is making people listen at the minute.
Jason Williamson. And Labour told us it is right that members who engage in abuse face suspension and that they should lose their vote. The party also said it should never tolerate abusive language and threatening behaviour. That's it. Thanks very much for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Have a good evening.